Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to this presentation. My name is Amy Tripson and I am the Program Director at Hope Beijing. We are located in Beijing, China, and obviously have been going through sort of our response to the coronavirus since early January. And so what we were hoping to do was really kind of put all the information in one place for everyone to access. We had such a great response to, I guess, the article that I wrote about our response, and just wanted to go a little bit more in depth and hopefully answer some additional questions to help out all the centers going through this right now. So I would just like to say that I'm presenting this on behalf of the whole Hope team. It is not something that one person can get through alone. And so one of the things that we're going to talk about a little bit later is how Hope really worked with everyone on the team to move forward. And so that we're actually in a pretty good spot right now. Looking forward to resuming lessons in May. So what we're hoping to do with this presentation is to learn a little bit about the Hope Beijing response to COVID-19, some of the things that happened to us, as well as the choices that we made moving forward. We're going to share with you some lessons learned from the quarantines and self-isolations. And then also we're going to pose some questions about how to figure out and plan for your own organization what might be best for your program to do. So one of the things that I wanted to start with is to think back a couple months to sort of the Hope Beijing timeline, as I'm calling it. Now these dates are not necessarily this is exactly when things happen, but as I was looking through my phone and messages, it's around these times. So maybe something happened that week. We just wanted to give you a broader timeline of how we've been handling things. So when COVID-19 first sort of became an issue in China was during Chinese New Year. So I want you to think about, like, if something had happened over Christmas, right? Christmas and New Year's, a lot of people go home. This is sort of the exact day that it happened that people started being aware of COVID-19 sort of being a problem in Beijing. And so I was at the stable. Everyone was home for the holiday. And so we started first having things happening to us as far as just being aware of what was happening, having staff in different locations, and how to move forward from that. So then the following week, January 27th, so we operate out of a larger stable. Dongfeng Mahui is DFMH in the timeline, and I put a little key in the bottom just so you guys are aware. We operate out of this stable, and they, I thought they had actually canceled lessons, but as it turned out, people just stopped showing up. So people were really afraid. The decision was partially made for them, as well as they decided to start canceling lessons. And I wanted to let you know that because Hope was not running lessons at this time. We were actually in our program break. And so I know a lot of places are asking about what they should do. I think Dongfeng Mahui, they actually did, exactly what a lot of people are doing. They said, look, we are going to still run lessons until it is unsafe to do so. And they made that decision pretty early on for their coaches, for their riders that were coming, just as a general precaution, because they wanted to be creating a safe situation. So Hope staff at this point are still on holiday. People were talking about staying where you are. So the Chinese government was really encouraging people not to move at this point. And so I was still at this stable, working with the horses. And it was actually, I kept telling the team, I said, I'm great. I said, I'm cleaning stalls. I said, I'm riding horses. I was having a lovely time. So around the end of January, we knew that some things needed to change. The holiday was over. I'd been working for a little while, and our stable assistant was supposed to be coming back to Beijing that week. But there were still a lot of closures. There was still a lot of limited transportation. So we were trying to figure out what was going to happen. So he actually came back to the stable, and the stable owner said, look, and before anything happens, let's just do 2 days of self-isolation. And before he can even start working with the horses, right? They just wanted to make sure that there was a little bit of time, a little bit of lag time before he was going to be out working with people. Now, obviously, we know that the recommendation is a 14-day isolation. So this was not a mandated thing. It was just saying, hey, you're coming back from a different location. Let's just have an extra precaution. So he started working on Monday, which I believe is this February 3rd date. And at this time, over this weekend, we decided to bring me back from Beijing, and our assistant program director was actually in the US. So we essentially traded places. So I came back from Beijing. Again, it was just getting harder to navigate. When you don't speak the native language, it can be a really hard time, a real challenge on a daily basis. And so we just wanted to make sure that obviously, the team was supportive of my needs, and that we got our assistant program director back to, her native country. So we essentially traded places, and we both went into 14-day quarantine. So when she got back to China, she had to do a 14-day quarantine. When I came back, I had to do a 14-day quarantine here in the US. And that was really even before, like, China was already still doing stuff. That was before anything really happened in the US. So we just wanted to, again, to make sure that we were doing the best that we could to protect the people around us. So shortly after I got back to the US, February 5th, Dongfeng Wei went under, and in their surrounding areas, underwent a 14-day mandatory quarantine issued by the village, by the government that we're in. And around that same time, the government in Beijing actually closed all of like the gyms and all the recreational facilities. Everything was really pretty much shut down. There was no movement for a lot of people in Beijing at that time. So towards the end of February, our assistant program director started to return to stable work with the horses. She also started to develop the videos. Really all of February, we still had meetings. We were still talking about, what we needed to do. We were brainstorming for how we were going to come back once she was able to get to the stable, and sort of what the plans were. Like, what do we need to do? There was a lot of planning in February. So now things have kind of stayed a status quo within China at this point, as things have escalated in the US and in a lot of other Western countries. So we're thinking like this week, so March 20th, so schools are still out in Beijing. The majority of, well, in Beijing they are. In mainland China, some schools have started to return. But there were no new, last week I believe it was, there were no new cases of COVID-19 within China. However, they do have cases of people who are coming back from overseas who are bringing the virus with them. So if you look at the overall counts, China has implemented a pretty strict quarantine process now for anyone returning to Beijing. So March 24th, again, we had plans to slowly resume unmounted lessons. Tentatively, we were planned for April. And this is just to show you too how fast things can change. I just had a meeting this morning with our assistant program director, and she said that over the past 24, 48 hours, that has changed again. So because of the new viruses coming in from people moving back to China, we are reevaluating. People are still not comfortable going out and being in this environment. So it really is a lot of organizations want to know what the right decision is, and we can't tell you that. We can just say what we're doing. Like I said, we were like ready to go back. We were going to start unmounted lessons, planning to like in April. And as of our last conversation, it's probably looking to May, maybe even June. So, again, I just wanted to give you guys an overall view of like our timeline. And if we go to this next slide, so the initial impact of COVID-19 in Beijing for us really started around January 20th. This was the week that everyone left for Chinese New Year. This was the week that people on social media started talking, that news sources were really starting to promote sort of self-isolation, closures. I believe yesterday, our current days without program were 22 days. Now, I essentially took when we were supposed to start program back up at the end of February, and had it till yesterday. So we're looking right now at a minimum of 22 days. Our expected start date for full program is looking to be May or June. So obviously that is going to greatly increase. And what we're doing right now is trying to figure out again how we get to May or June without this additional income. And then what do we need to do in May or June to make sure that we are promoting a safe environment, that we understand that not everyone may return. Volunteers might be really hard to find. So these are just all the questions that we're really thinking of as we move forward. All right, so I wanted to again tell you a little bit about what we experienced, and what I'm really hoping to do is to help you guys think through what you're dealing with. So one of the first things that we recognized are that team decisions are crucial. In the short time that things have been happening in the U.S., I've heard a lot of people who are uncertain about what their organization is doing. So I think it's important to recognize that as a team, you guys need to come to these decisions together. So we need to focus on what can we decide, right? What are our staff schedules? What is our program schedule? Are we going to move forward with running program? Are we going to be stopping everything? Are we doing modified program? I can't give you those answers. I can let you know that we weren't running program, but pretty quickly after things started, within China, that things started coming from the government and from, local communities and stuff, everything was shut down. And I think if you look at China right now, they're on sort of the uphill swing, right? We're moving forward, and it was 2 months to really get there. So the longer that people aren't on board with the plan, the longer it will take to get back to normal. So we can decide staff welfare. I saw a lot of concerns about, if people were coming to the stable, if they weren't coming to the stable, if how much they were working, what people were doing. So staff welfare, our staff are dedicated. They've given so much to the organization over the time that we've been with the organization. How are they doing, right? How is their mental health? How are they doing in isolation? What did they need during this time to come out on the other side? So we can decide on salaries, and I put to an extent. So again, a lot of people right now are saying like, okay, we're done. We're not paying you. Well, I understand that it is quite different for each organization. One of the things that we decided as a staff was, what are we able to live with, and what do we need to keep moving forward, right? Like, we didn't ask for this to happen. The organization didn't ask for this to happen. So we're products of our environment. So early on, I have a whole slide coming up that we talk about the budget and what can we control? How do we still help support our staff, who help support our organization during this time? And recognize what those priorities are. What are your priorities as an organization, as your staff, to keep moving forward? Okay, so what was decided for us? Obviously we're in a very, very different situation in China, that things on very little notice were just shut down. So transit within Beijing and surrounding areas. So buses were still running. You could still take taxis, but there were stipulations to it. So, for example, I used to take the bus to work, but as you can see on the right, to the right of this slide, the picture, the village shut down. So I used to get off the bus and I used to be able to cut through this village to get to work. And it would take maybe 10, 15 minutes from my apartment to get to work. Once this village closed down, it took me a minimum half an hour to 40 minutes to get to work. I could still take the bus, but I had to get off on a different stop and I had to go a roundabout way. So that was decided for us, and so I started taking taxis to work, or I would walk if I couldn't get a taxi or the bus. Again, what was decided for us, the self-isolations and quarantines. All right. If you're in self-isolation or quarantine, you need to be in that self-isolation or quarantine, right? if you come out of that, you're jeopardizing the people around you. So when the village quarantined themselves, we can't do anything about that. If I choose to violate that quarantine, that is jeopardizing everyone else in that quarantine. The stable went under quarantine, so people weren't allowed in, right? Like, it doesn't matter if your horses need their feet done. Okay, it is dangerous for someone outside of the stable to go into the stable. So that was decided for us. We also can't necessarily control our donor support. So what is the situation for everyone around us? We don't know how the quarantines, how the closures are affecting our donors. So on a certain level, we can't, it was decided for us who could donate and who couldn't. So I know another big topic, obviously, because we're therapeutic riding centers or adaptive riding centers, are the horses. So who is taking care of the horses? How are they staying healthy and fit? So again, Hope was not running lessons at the start of the virus. We were on our holiday break. It was Chinese New Year. And so we really didn't have any volunteers. We didn't have any participants coming. We were pretty much already shut down. So again, something that was out of our control was about 3 weeks after the start of the holiday, this stable was quarantined for 14 days. Again, completely out of our control. So I have found that people can get really frustrated by these stipulations, right? I can't do anything about it. We as an organization can't change that quarantine. We can find ways that we might be able to work with it, right? I had asked about moving to the stable, taking an air mattress. We have a kitchen there during Chinese New Year, and we decided against that. But there are ways that, if I was already at the stable, then I'm included in the quarantine, then I'm effectively at the stable for 14 days. Luckily, our stable assistant came back before then, and he has an apartment there at the stable. So he was able to be there to take care of our horses. If it does come to that, it is going to be helpful if people are on site. It makes everyone feel a lot more comfortable. You know that the horses are going to be cared for. You know that someone is there that's going to be looking after them. So we are very fortunate at Hope. We are stabled at Dongfang Mahui Stables, also called Oriental Equestrian Club. They have an excellent facility. They have excellent management, and they really planned for a lot of the factors that may have happened during that time. So they accounted for grain and hay and shavings. When I talked with the stable managers, they said they'd already reevaluated the grain intake of the horses, knowing that they weren't going to be ridden as often. There are 70 horses at this facility, and there was no way that they were going to have the staff to school these horses every day. So, they don't need as much grain as they'd been having. So they rationed grain a little bit. For our horses, I said it was actually a great thing for them. I have found that a lot of therapeutic riding horses also may be a little overweight. Our horses are actually looking really, really good right now because of this time period. They were had a little bit more limited grain, and maybe kind of can reevaluate that maybe they don't actually need that much grain that they have every day. But the stable really was proactive in understanding that there may be shortages, and also that even if there aren't shortages, we might have trouble getting some of this, the hay and the grain into this stable because of the quarantine. So it's really important to think about that piece of it and to manage what you have as well as what might be coming in. All right. So one of the biggest things that the organization did, which I found really, really wonderful, and our business operations manager came to us and said, this is our situation. So I think that looking at the budget, which many of you have, but also sharing that information with the team is going to be really helpful. So looking at what is your budget and where are your donors. So now is the time, again, everyone is hurting, okay? Like, no one is like, wow, this is great, I have tons of money floating around. So what you need to think about, again, are how long can your organization survive without any income? Okay, so you're probably not going to have lessons for a while. you can look at, existing donors or, potential new donors, but like without any revenue from lessons or other activities. How long can you pay staff to work remotely or at the stable when needed? So like horse care, if there's exercise that you guys need to do. Because it's important, right? We don't want to abandon our staff right now. We're going to eventually need them back. And will your major donors be able to support you during this time? So one of the very first things that we did, and not, that I did, but that our organization did, was they reached out to our major donors and they said, look, like we understand that this is a really trying time for a lot of people. We offered them, some cuts like, hey, would you be interested in fulfilling, your full donation? Would you be interested in fulfilling half your donation or supporting it if we repurpose it to, care for the horses? Coming up with creative solutions for people to do that, I think it shows that you're aware, that that they're potentially in some financial constraints as well, but also that you're really aware of the situation as a whole. And I think you need to really think about what the values of your organization are. So the HOPE values are respect, service, compassion, education, integrity, and quality. And then I added some of those. And I thought during this time, we needed to be transparent. We needed to share what was happening within the organization with both our staff, but also with our donors. We needed to look at sustainability. Like, what was our ultimate goal? And I think for a lot of organizations, that ultimate goal is, how do we not shut down? How do we keep our doors open so that when we do get through this, that we can still serve participants? Kindness, understanding that everyone is going through the same thing that you are, right? And also support. What do our staff need? What do participants need? What do our volunteers need? How can we support one another during this time? All right, so what we ended up doing, and so this is a picture of Luna up in the corner here. And so Luna essentially did a projection for the next 3 months. And this was back in, I believe, early February, because we just kind of needed to know. We said, how can we keep going? How long can we keep going? When do we need to start making cuts? So she essentially looked at it, she said, how much money do we have in the HOPE account? And so we took that number and she then did like a 3-month projection. And we looked at what's our monthly projection with maintained donors and organization costs, right? So horse salaries, do we need to pay the electric bill, stuff like that. And so we looked at this 3-month projection and we said, how long can we sustain the status quo without sacrificing something? And I can't even say that there was, someone asked, which was a great question, if we had a formula. We didn't. We just looked at this 3-month projection, and based on if we could maintain our current monthly donors, and looking at, our expenses, we got to the point at about month 3 that we fell below what we considered a sure amount. And it was like a solid number. And I looked at that number and I said, as did the rest of the team, I think if we fall below this number, we need to reevaluate. If we get to the point where we're running the projection for the next month and we fall below this base number, and in my mind, that base number said, okay, if something major happens, catastrophic, if we have a horse emergency, we need to have this fund available, but we also need to know that, like, if we have this fund available and we cut things, we're probably still good for another few months. So that number is going to be different for everyone. But we looked at it, and with Luna and Priscilla, who's our founder and executive director, we looked at our budget and we said, okay, this is the number. If we start to fall below this number, we are going to have to change something. So my next thought as I was thinking through this was, what needs to be sacrificed? And I thought, no, we don't need to be talking about sacrifice, right? Like, oh, it's sacrifice, I had to cut my salary. It's an adaptation. This is impacting everyone. It is not a sacrifice to me to say, hey, take 20% of my salary, put it back in the organization. Because if we put that money back, then the organization lives another day, right? So I wanted to take out this idea of sacrifice because for me, it was such a negative. It was like you're losing something. And we're not losing something. We're working together to achieve a team goal, right? So what needs to be adapted first, right? What adaptations do we as an organization need to make to keep moving forward? So early on, one of the first things that we talked about was in China at this time, a lot of organizations were talking about doing a 20% cut of the salary. And again, very early on, we talked to the team. And granted, we have a pretty small team, but we talked to the team and we said, look, we want you to send your percentage that you feel like you could lose and still maintain, what you need to on a monthly basis. We want you to send that percentage also based on how much work you're able to do from home to our business operations manager and to our founder. And what they were saying is that they wanted people, like, if they felt like they weren't actually doing a whole lot, that they could say, you could take 50% of my salary. I really can't do a whole lot at home. I only need that much to survive on, for my monthly allowance. We can't do anything anyway. Everything's shut down. And recognizing that whatever money did not come for your salary was essentially recycling back in the organization so that we could still move forward within another month. One of the first things that we really talked about was the very first month, in February and really even in March was, people still had their standard bills and their standard savings and all this stuff that was just happening to them, right? They still needed to pay these bills. And so we made the decision that the first month that all staff would still receive, their full salary. And then we talked about how each month after that, we would kind of meet and talk about it once we fell below that sort of acceptable number, to reevaluate. And so that, again, that has worked out really well for us. We're all still essentially working full time, remotely, a lot of us. And then the staff in China right now are still working. They're going to the stable and we're making videos, and we're really able to move forward in a lot of ways, administratively, that we just didn't expect during this time. So, the other thing to consider is that, you're going to be losing any money that you're thinking of having for events. Okay. At least for the time being. There are a lot of organizations that have big fundraisers during this time, into like May and June. You might not get that, right? And if you are still planning to have it, you might not get that full goal that you were thinking of having during that event. I think some creative solutions to that are either holding like online fundraisers, reaching out to those donors. There were a ton of parties in Beijing. One of the big Beijing sort of fundraising scene are like these galas and big dinners and events. And a lot of them right now have just been postponed. So, it might still happen. It's just going to happen probably later, than you initially intended. So I wanted to pose some questions for everyone. Again, hoping that they might trigger something to really help you think through this situation. So people keep asking, if they should shut down. I know a lot of centers have finally reached that point, but some of the questions to think about that we even think about, as we're looking to get back to program is, can you guarantee that everyone coming to your organization is healthy? Have they been? So unless you know that someone has been in a self-isolation for 14 days, does not have a temperature or any symptoms, you don't know if they're healthy. Okay. And that extends to, you don't know if they're healthy or that they're negative for COVID-19. And then can you guarantee that no transmission will happen at your facility? Again, the answer to that is no. Okay. You might think that you can limit transmission, but I tell you what, there are hospitals that are designed and sanitized and are structured to limit transmission, and things are still happening. So the answer again to that is no. Are you doing your part for the greater good, right? This is an internal question, that we all have to come to individually, and that should affect our decisions to move forward. And the other big piece is, are you following government, both national and local guidance? That is probably top priority, right? Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? And if you are not, what are the repercussions of that? And then if you are following the guidance, can you answer those first 3 questions truthfully, and accurately, and with feeling like you're doing what is best? So again, I can't necessarily answer those questions, great or good for you, but I think if you really think through, these are going to help guide your decision, hopefully in the right direction. All right. So for organizations then that you still have staff on site, excuse me, and you're, trying to figure out what you can do. So obviously you could do a deep clean, right? Like wipe everything down, have very limited interactions with people, wear gloves. If you're cleaning, make sure that you have gloves on, but that you're using an antiseptic or something that's going to kill the virus, if you're wiping it down. I mean, and we're looking at cleaning, right? Like we can clean and make sure that we don't have any bacteria there too, which is also going to be really good. So do you still have people on site? And are those people on site maintaining appropriate distances? Are they using protective equipment or hand sanitizer, washing their hands when they're handling things? And how are you protecting those individuals? So as an organization, are you making sure that things are sanitized, that people are staying farther away? The last thing that you want is someone, to come, to get the virus and say, oh gosh, well, I was volunteering last week and I was talking to this person, and then you find out that it happened at your facility. So thinking about common things that are touched repeatedly: doors, phones, pens, reins, toys, saddle handles. So like if you're still running program, again, I don't know who's all doing what at this point because it's varying greatly across the US. But making sure like things like doors and phones and pens. So, phones, like not only are you handling, but you have saliva obviously coming out of your mouth on the phone. So making sure that we're wiping those down, making sure that either people are bringing their own pens or that you're wiping them down daily. Again, this is not the primary transition source, but it is still really important to make sure that we're doing our part. Do you also have an implemented policy for what someone should do if they are sick? Do people know that if they're not feeling well, whether that is they're tired or that they're coughing or they have a fever, that they don't have to come in, right? That you're actually encouraging them to stay home. A lot of the time, people come to work or come to volunteer because they don't think that they're feeling like you need them. Okay. So have you communicated that your wish as an organization is if you're not feeling well, that they should stay home, and that they should not come to your organization? And can you support that? So if someone calls in sick, can you support the fact that they're not coming that day? What are your plans in place? And I think that as an organization is a really important piece of it. What if you have volunteers coming to feed and, they call in sick? Like, do you have staff who can come in to help? What is your plan long term to help support that? Not only in the next couple weeks, but in the next couple months. All right. So some tips that we thought of that we just wanted to share are to prepare for the unexpected. So, one of the things that we found out was that our farrier could not come to the stable during the quarantine. And it just so happened that we had already gone for quite a while because of the holiday. So we had our horses who were done in early January. And it just so turns out that between the holiday and the quarantine, it was an extended period of time that the farrier was unable to come to the stable. He actually wasn't even in Beijing. And so our horses are barefoot, which ended up, and they get turned out every day. So it ended up being, something to think about. But for us, it ended up not being the worst case situation, right? If your horses have shoes, if they have like specialty shoeing and certain needs, that's going to be something that you need to prepare for. Do you know how to pull off a shoe? Do you know what to do if your horse's shoe is hanging, by a nail? And what can we do? Do you need to buy boots? Just to plan if your horse can't be in their shoes. So prepare for the unexpected. Think about, what would happen if this person couldn't come out? what is going to happen if the vet can't get out. And again, it might not be a full quarantine. Maybe your vet isn't feeling well, right? And she's like, or he's, saying, oh, I can't come out. I'm stuck in my house. So like, what do we then do to move forward to prepare for that situation? Stay up to date on government policies. Again, it's going to be really important that our organizations are doing the best that we can to follow guidelines and policies put out by your local government, but put out by the national government. And so just be aware of that. Settle in and prepare for the long haul. I saw initially a lot of centers were saying, hey, we're going to close for 2 weeks. It's going to be a lot longer than that. And I say that because of the current situation right now happening in the country. So I think again, I can't say for sure that it's going to be a lot longer because I cannot see the future, but knowing what we have done in China, it's going to be months. And I think there are people right now that are saying that, that are looking at over the summer all the way to August. I don't necessarily know if you'll be shut down that long, but just know that, we're going into our 3rd month in China, and we're still looking at at least another month after that before we can resume our normal program. The sooner you accept that that is going to be more than likely what happens, you can start planning and making contingency plans to help support your program. So make sure that you communicate with your staff, donors, participants. Now everyone is so uncertain about what's happening. So try to maintain that sense of normalcy. A lot of our participants, they look forward to coming to lessons every week. That's part of their routine. How great would it be during their lesson time if you reached out and just said, hey, thinking about you. Are you doing any activities? Send a worksheet, send a video. Obviously checking, with parents and caregivers and everyone to make sure that they're comfortable with that. But now is the time to really maintain that relationship. And I forgot to put volunteers in here, but with volunteers as well, it's so important that we maintain those relationships, that we show that we're able to still support even if we are not on site. And just making sure that everyone's okay, just checking in to make sure everyone has what they need and that they're comfortable during this time. And then last but not least, be flexible and maintain a sense of humor. Our life is going to be very, very different than what it has been previously for at least the next few months. So recognize that flexibility is a very important trait. And if we're stuck on making sure that things happen exactly as they're supposed to, we're not going to be able to adapt to a new normal. We were just talking about, getting on Facebook or getting on the news, and it can be really, really hard to find the positive things and to not be overwhelmed by the thousands and millions of feedback that we're getting from news and social media and different sites. And so it's really important that you maintain a sense of humor, maintain that flexibility, make sure that you stop and watch that little video of a cute animal, which at times we might say, wow, like I can't believe that someone is watching this, right? Or I can't believe that, during this time, people are sharing this information. But we have to, right? We have to maintain our sanity. We have to maintain our sense of humor. We have to have this well-rounded mental well-being. Our mental health is really a priority right now. So I just want to let you know that we understand what you're going through and that, we have found that these are really valuable pieces to have. So last but not least, don't forget that you'll need your staff back when this is all over. So hope, and again, this was not a personal decision for me. Like I did not make the decision, by myself, but we as a team made all of these decisions. And right now changes are really happening to people that we don't like and that are taking away this control. So people are feeling very out of control. So I want you to really make decisions with your staff, share what is happening with the team. If your staff knows and understands what is happening with the organization, it's going to make your organization more likely to come out on the other end if you guys are all working together and understand what's happening. And I find that to be such a powerful thing that we have experienced over the last couple months, and that I'm really hopeful that a lot of organizations are thinking about as you're moving forward. That it's really a team effort, right? Like, we want our organization to succeed because we love it and we want it to keep moving forward, and we're really excited to get back to lessons. And if we need to make adaptations within our organization, that we're all on board with that, and that we can all move forward for the greater good. So I wanted to just highlight all of our staff. Oh, I'm blocked out, but that's okay because I'm down here. But Dr. Priscilla Lightsey is our founder, an executive director. She's up in the top left-hand corner. And then you have Lucia, who is our assistant program director. Under both of them, you have Mr. Wong, who's holding Heishan, and he's been just selflessly working with our horses. I think he's been at the stable every day, cleaning stalls, grooming, making sure they're okay. Next to the right of him, you have Luna, who is our business operations manager, and has been working really hard on our budget and making sure that Hope is in a good place financially. And then above her, you have Katie, who is our development manager, and she's really been trying to find additional, resources for us, fundraising wise, making sure that we can still have money coming in somehow in the next few months, and trying to adapt during this time to make sure that we're able to still move forward. So we just wanted to, from all of us, we wanted to thank you guys for watching our presentation. And then I just put a little information here in case you guys are interested in learning more about Hope, and our mission and vision, as well as our website, hopebeijing.org. And then last but not least, if you have any additional questions, I'm currently in the US right now, and so I'm available at normal times to communicate. And so I have, my email up here on the screen. And then Dr. Lightsey also is primarily in the US. And so she is the founder and executive director. And if you have any additional questions for her, you can just email her at hopebeijingchina@gmail.com. But we're here to help you guys, and to make sure that we can do however much we can do to support you during this time, and know that while we don't have all the answers, we do have some experience to help you navigate this new situation. So thank you so much for your time and for listening to our presentation. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to help. All right, thank you guys so much and good luck.